we on?
I think we are.
Tim Glow, Flow Studios.
Sarah DiFelice. Can we hear us?
Oh yeah, 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 yeah.
Ooh, yeah, yeah. Can you hear us? Can you see us? Well, hello and thank you for coming back. I don't know if we're less choppy and if you can hear us okay. We've been having technical issues. So it goes.
It is the world
It is
as
the-
we now know it right this
as the
second.
world we
Everyone's-
know it.
Everybody and their cousins on social in some form or another right this second.
The internet is getting, yes, extra social connection.
Yes,
in this-
bandwidth is needed.
Not called social distance, being very social. But
Yes, we've got
the physical
we have
distance.
the physical proximity.
And we're also outside, so
Yeah.
yes. Okay, Rome is saying it's much better. Thank you for commenting,
you.
Rome. And let us know if you're here. Let us know where you're tuning in from. This is a show where we like to engage. And today's topic is be change you seek, which I think is just very, very times. And that was a quote that I heard, I remember way back younger. And it created this whole hashtag movement that I started years ago called Peace In for the Peace Out. And I had this whole recognition when I was younger that in order for there to be peace out there in the world, to start within. And you know, probably heard that from Gandhi originally.
I was going to say, it was Gandhi
It was
or
Gandhi
I think
or-
it was or the Dalai Lama.
Yes, one
Just
of
be
those.
the change you seek.
But it just, I mean, it made so much sense to me at that time, and I started doing community meditations based off of that understanding, and everything starts within. And this is what we're all about here on Flow Network. We created this whole concept of the Flow internal network effect, which based off of the Mandela effect and the Maharishi effect, and great teachers such as Gandhi and those
Yes,
past.
we are all connected. And the interesting thing, I saw a post just maybe talking about the social fabric. The social fabric that's actually knitting our worlds together right now is digital, which has been in play for quite some time, and we've seen it always as this version of connectedness and consciousness and our connection with each other. And it is the digital that actually is showing us the way to still be separate or still have physical distance, but be connected. Not saying that's all we need, but certainly it is really shining the light quite brightly on the implications and the opportunity for digital to bridge us from a world where we were taught everything of any worth or anything worth understanding took place out there. Physics, from that perspective, I got a math background and also an accounting background. Everything that was taking place out there. That is true of absolutely everything in the old legacy system, which is a top-down system. We were taught to orient out that way, and the structures that were put in place were meant to contain direct behavior, desired behavior, to get a certain kind of result. And it really worked for a whole pile of years, but it's now time to shift that. And to be able to shift that, a lot of people can't see how much they've actually put themselves in boxes. And the challenge right now, rather than actually telling other people to change or how to change, the opportunity right now is to be the change you seek. Be grateful for the opportunity to be able to reflect, or if you happen to be in a situation where you're in a 10 by 10 apartment with 10 people, that actually makes it difficult. But still, you can appreciate what it's like to be with family, not necessarily in that situation, but that's what's happening right now. Everybody is being forced to actually go back and cocoon into their dwelling, and start to get in touch with the fact that, one, you don't want to spread the virus, but also start to get in touch with who you are from a totally different perspective. Because when you're in those situations where you're with your loved ones or your first family, it starts to actually give you an understanding of where you came from and who you are, and what are some of the behaviors and patterns that you've carried on and maybe weren't aware of carrying them on. And this is an opportunity to start to learn about that and start to carry forward what you want to carry forward and let go what you don't want to carry forward.
Yeah, it's taking responsibility for the fact that we are responsible for our own energy, and really what it is that we want is something we need to cultivate within us. And as you say, we're all faced up against more of intense mirrors, like being around your first family or wherever you spend a lot of your time, and using this as an opportunity for reflection with the understanding that every single thing in your reality, even the situation, the global situation that is occurring, we're all doing this work of reflecting on like what was working or what's not working, and then the responsibility to let go of what's not working, so that we can integrate and up level together as a humanity into new ways of being. But there's going to be this period that is yucky, like no one really like it. You know, looking. I remember what, like, years ago when I first heard this concept that reflection of me, or like what I see in another, whether it's a good thing, whether it's a good quality, or whether it's a negative quality. There's some sort of aspect of that could be within me, especially if it triggers me or if it really gets me to some degree. And that's an opportunity to have some sort of reflection. And how would you say is when somebody is faced with that and they're taking on that reflection, how do they integrate or let go? Like, what does that look like, so that they're being the change? Like, what does that really mean?
So the frame of reference that I got introduced to over a long period of time helped spur me on looking for models. This is who I am. I create models. We've created frames of reference over the last 27 years, really to be able to go and help society pivot at this particular point in time. This is the big game, the big show, the big play, the big pivot. This is something that we've put together and in anticipation of something like this happening. And we had it in 2002 with SARS, but now we have the 2020 huge, and it's impacting everybody at the well-being level. So it's a pivot from wealth to actually beget well-being, to well-being that actually begets wealth. And one of the great models that I heard about was a model put together by Dr. David Hawkins, and he featured it in his book Power vs. Force, and it's the scale of consciousness. And given my background in math, I very much moved to that. And so at the low level is shame and guilt. You start to move up the scale of consciousness, your vibrational frequency starts to increase. You get to courage, and once you actually get to courage, you can start to move in ways and start to reflect in ways that you never thought possible. And you move to acceptance, and then once you actually have acceptance, usually you can actually entertain the discussions around how you're presenting. If in fact you want to be the change you seek, you have to actually look around you and take a really hard look at the fact that you're attracting situations and people that may or may not be something that you really think is a reflection of who you are. But the wonderful thing with quantum physics and complexity is it doesn't have an agenda. You attract people and situations and circumstances that are mere attractors of you. So the scale of consciousness starts at a density, low frequency, vibrational frequency, and Hawkins actually scored that on a logarithmic scale, which means nothing to anybody except me. The point being is that at the bottom level, it's really, really difficult for people, if they're locked in fear, or the fear response around shame, guilt, apathy, it's hard for them to reflect because they're just constantly getting triggered by the environment around them. And the vast majority of people on the planet are in that place. It's not until you move to courage and then acceptance that you can actually start to take charge of your life. You start to get some perspective on the fact that, wait a minute, this thing keeps on happening to me over and over and over again. Maybe I've got something, I'm doing something to be able to go and create that. Maybe I'm being, which is an outrageous concept, or was for years, I'm being the change or the lack of change I seek. And it is the model, that model in particular, we've been using that for since it was actually introduced, because it's really, really helpful, because it helps people triangulate around the idea that, wait a minute, if like attracts like, and I'm being all happy and joyous to the best of my ability, but I'm still attracting crap, maybe there's something inside me that I'm being, as opposed to it just being doing light things and things that make me feel happy and grateful and all kinds of stuff. Because you can change your vibrational frequency from being in a pissy mood to immediately being grateful, but that frequency is not sustained if all you're doing is doing going through the motions of doing gratitude or doing things that you love. Until you actually encompass it in who you're being, the frequency doesn't change.
Right.
That's a long answer to your question.
It was. What is the answer if anybody's watching on the line, how do you let go? It's not to make fear the bad guy, or because the pandemic right now is fear, and I think it's unearthing real fears that we've collectively held about who we are, and I've been exploring that myself, talking to clients specifically this week, like living in the city as well and being all connected and we're all empathetic, feel one another. It's like allowing myself to go on fears that I have for really like the vision that I've had and like what it means. My biggest thing that I recognition, like fear of actually being recognized.
Right. And
so how I would have attracted things that would have sabotaged or blocked that in the past. And so this is our opportunity to, like Tim said, not just just focus on the gratitude and just focus on the higher vibration, which is important because it increases your immunity, but to also spend time to go into actually go into our fears and bring love to them. And that is, for me, being the change we seek is there's a lot of people that are being negative towards the people that are in fear modes. But I think what's occurring is like this like we're all coming together at this level of compassion.
Yeah. And
there's such an opportunity for like a rapid change, I believe, in this space if we all really are being the change we seek. And then when we go out, like how are we viewing others around us, like if we're in the grocery store or like really what is the change that we're doing, because it's all going to happen at the individual level. Rome, I just want to say, Rome, hello. He says it looks warm. There it is. I'm actually sweating.
Yeah,
I'm sweating right now.
It's extremely warm.
It's like,
I think if in fact we weren't in this enclosure, it would be a temperature I think is about
down there. People are wearing
13 degrees or something Celsius.
We're like in this greenhouse effect here.
Yeah, this feels like about 25. Like it's really warm.
It is really warm.
I wanted to add to a comment, because you were asking me to give you an example, and I said I use a frame of reference because I'm context based. I triangulate to a frame of reference, being that scale of consciousness from Dr. David Hawkins. But to give a real life example, right now my wife, as I've mentioned a few times, is she's actually she's got ovarian cancer she's being treated for, and this is the second round. An interesting thing, because she is actually a master of all kinds of things, transformational and light and energy and all kinds of things. And as she goes through this journey, daily talk about anything that comes up that frightens us. So obviously, we've actually gone through the what if she dies, what happens to the dogs, where do we live, like all those types of things we talked about right at the very beginning, the first version. The second round where we're in right now. So now we have the opportunity with COVID and the pandemic, and because she's really highly at risk, the need to actually keep our immune system really, really, really strong, because disease, when we look at it, cancer or anything else, is defined in alt health and alternative health as a crisis and a healing crisis. So disease, dissonance in a quantum mechanics or complexity, which is actually running the show and has been for years in the economics and the businesses. So the crisis there is an opportunity to actually start to recognize that it's an identity crisis. So if people are having crisis, that's what they need to lean into and have conversations about. Mm-hmm. And it's not until you can actually lean into those situations and have conversations that you can even start to recognize what you need to let go of. Mm-hmm. So last night I was bawling quite a bit, and I think I was actually having a bit of tears this morning, even moving through various scenarios in talking to my wife before I drove into the city, just about making sure we keep the physical distance in place and making sure that I honor the fact that there's a whole pile of people trying to work in this situation or this scenario. And in our case, we're, in Canada, if it's a gathering of less than 5 people, you can still do that, but be really, really conscious of it. And I came up in the elevator, and there's 3 X's in the elevator, marking on the ground with green tape where to stand. So this is, in Canada, quite a big deal in terms of the physical the physical distancing.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm reminded in places like the United States, there's states, and like most of the country still hasn't actually moved into the notion of let's actually keep our distance here.
So I was going to ask, do they have in the grocery stores in Burlington the tape on the
They have the distance between, so I have to go to.
and also a lot of people like lines waiting outside?
Yeah.
Yes.
I went to the liquor store there, and we got to the liquor store a couple of weeks ago, and it wasn't open. So that was really a challenge for people because everyone was coming from different distances. So rather than actually lining up 6 feet from each other, it came like a half of a spider's web because people were on that line, and then they put themselves, and so there was about 20 of us waiting for the door to open. And it's interesting because socially, everybody talked to everybody in that situation.
Mm-hmm.
You go to a liquor store and you don't tend to actually talk to everybody.
Yeah.
Everybody's talking to everybody. I go for groceries.
Yeah.
Everybody is talking.
Yeah.
And it's just a beautiful thing. It's crisis brings out, I believe, the best if in fact you're willing to move in that direction on the scale of consciousness up to acceptance, love, peace, or it actually also brings out the worst. And what's good about that is you start to discover you're holding on to some fear that you possibly actually picked up, when you were really, really young and you were totally unconscious.
And the fear, like what we're doing is like transcending these a lot of irrational fears,
Right.
but that are pure rational for people because of the conditioning of where they grew up. I mean, we have a lot of privileges here in Canada, which is something to be really grateful for. But the notion of what would it be like to not live in fear all the time?
Yeah.
And like you're saying, watching the behavior change of people already, like especially living in the city, like people just really kept keeping to themselves,
Yeah.
and like we were social isolating on our own accord in a lot of
way
before. And I think Irvin Laszlo talks about evolution. We need connection, and so this dis-ease that we've been experiencing as a humanity is like we've all been disconnecting from one another. And what I'm finding now is we like are forced to communicate, and it's so great to see, like even in Toronto, like people smiling and a human, and yes, like we want to we're recognizing like what's really important, and that is connection, even with a stranger, even a smile. And this concept and notion of like, how are we really going to connect and be receptive to like learning new ways of being and learning about, we talk a lot about what business is going to be looking like, and
as we go forward.
And what I'm just seeing, because there's so many events coming online now, whether they're meditation or yoga or Zoom meetings, because businesses are all getting in the space. In some ways, it's seeing how disconnected we have gotten.
Yes.
And then also like what is new communication and
what is connection?
And what is connection?
Right. Just because you've got a video on YouTube and or whatever, like the connection again, and I refer to scale of consciousness. The connection is a function of our vibrational frequency, or what I call our bandwidth. And the piece that I want to introduce, because we've introduced it before, but now I can introduce it relative to the scale of consciousness. Hawkins was identifying that I think it was 80%, give or take, of the population was at what we'll call a low frequency, below the courage frequency, or in or around that. And the other phenomena that tends to happen is we've been taught that we actually go and we cognitively actually talk about these things. And the thing that we introduce all the time to people is what we're actually doing is streaming within the bandwidth frequency, the vibrational frequency that we're holding. We're streaming information and energy at that level. So we're all, as human beings, streaming information and energy. We're streaming through social media, but I'm streaming what I'm saying. And the interesting thing that starts to come into play in a situation like this with crisis is that because we're streaming, and there's such a huge amount of people that are streaming from the low density, what they're also doing is they're oopsing. They're owning other people's streams. We call it own other people's shit or other people's stuff, but they're owning other people's streams. So you wake up in the morning, and especially in the city, if you're getting claustrophobic because you have to actually stay in this small space, you're not able to get out that much, or you don't really know how to ground yourself in the earth. People wake up freaked out because during the night, if in fact you don't have some kind of a practice to help yourself stay grounded through the night, or even during the daytime, you're oopsing. The more you oops at the dense frequency, the more it compromises your immune system, the more likely you're going to catch COVID, and the more likely, if in fact you carry on with that you're going to die. And the challenge is, in dying, not to be taken lightly. The idea on that scale of consciousness is if you're down in the depths of the slow frequencies or the low frequencies, likely you're oopsing other people. And even if you're in the high frequencies, it's very easy to get tagged and oops, because we talk to clients about this all the time. Feeling fairly good because they're up in the high frequencies, but they start to freak out because they feel it's responsible to own their team's fears, and in doing that they drag themselves down. So we have this little saying: leaders eat especially in crisis, leaders eat first. Leaders on a trip or on a journey have to look after themselves, and I think there's a book, Simon Sinek's book, is Leaders Eat Last. I think that possibly that's actually great when times are great, and that's a servant leadership orientation. What we're talking about is you have to feed yourself at the high frequency and allow people to tuck into your bandwidth to carry the day through this challenge. That's being the change you seek. Be the high frequency that enables other people to start to tuck into and stream high frequency trust and love, rather than what they would normally do on their own is defer to the low frequencies and oops like crazy on the low frequencies.
It's the whole notion of infectious. Fear is extremely infectious.
It's very familiar.
But so is gratitude and joy and smiles. That's also very infectious as well. Rome is saying, I see many feel uncertain about outcomes. I guess I have graduated to the state of release and find myself open to any results. That would be flow.
Perfect. Yeah, that's
and
flow.
That's the whole notion. I mean,
that's the higher frequency.
More than ever, the notion of flow is such an important thing to adopt in these uncertain times. It is obvious we band together how much we can accomplish. Yes.
Yes.
This is the notion of cooperation.
Network effect. Because and we use this internal-external pivot because everything has been presented as external. And the unicorns in the venture capital market, their go-to-market strategy is what they've called the external network effect. So they're building a digital infrastructure, and they're running and scaling that digital infrastructure. And what we're talking about is we're all connected. What we're doing is when we're running a business model or a proposition, we're scaling consciousness. That's the internal network effect. And it plays out absolutely everywhere. And I am very strongly, in my opinion, I feel that this is the big pivot from the external to the internal. And it's also a pivot from wealth and people just pursuing wealth out there to who cares what happens to the environment or each other. And as soon as I get enough money, I can then make sure that I'm feeling well. So wealth that begets well-being is pivoting to well-being is what attracts at the high frequencies wealth for everybody. So well-being that begets wealth is what we're pivoting to. And the mechanics associated with that are not something that they taught you in school. They've been around for thousands of years, but it's not something that in our education system we actually thought was important, because the whole education system was built to support big business at a point in time when we had the first industrial revolution. That's really how education was created, and it was created to serve that top-down orientation. Time for a change.
And that's what we're getting because all the schools are shut down.
Yeah.
So we're having to be creative. And I mean, so many people have been talking about the need for the education. The education system is outdated. And I think the younger generations definitely have a different style and way that they want to learn. And so what's good about this is, well, now we have the opportunity to understand what do families really want, how do kids really want to learn. And Rome says we're getting to our end as well, which is good because I'm sweating. My face is sweating off over here. If you are not taking advantage of this grow, you are missing a great opportunity. Yes, this is the opportunity we're all, and we can, like, even, you know, we talk about the power of our imagination, and our imagination with fear can start to imagine some pretty doom and gloom things in the world. But our imagination, and I like to use the word pronoia versus paranoia being more of the flow, like what if the universe, whatever you want to call it, is actually working in our favor. Like, for one, we've all been talking about education needs to change, you know, healthcare system needs to change. We're lucky here in Canada, relatively speaking, with a lot of things. Like, really, I think, and this was the premise of the Flow Network, is kind of seeing what's been going on around the world and how Canada, and, you know, we're in Toronto, has this real opportunity to rise as leaders and be examples for creating what we're really creating, this whole new foundation for society. I think, you know, this time that we have right now is, like, do not miss the opportunity to self-reflect on what it is that you really want. Like, what is you really want, and then using the power of your imagination to begin creating this for yourself in whatever way that looks like, with the understanding that the resonance and your energy is a broadcast, and it broadcasts and begins to create your reality. You'll flow, and you'll go to the grocery store at the right moment where, you know, there's no lines, and we're surrounded around smiling people. And you know, if we can, I can feel in the collective, there's this like apocalyptic, thank you, apocalyptic sense. Like, you know, what are you imagining, not just for yourself, but for what your community is doing when they're at home? Like, what if we could all just send love to all the people in their, you know, in their just really encouraging this reflection and this growth and this shedding of the fears, because it really is the fear of what it really means to be outrageously you. And that's what this is all about. You be you. And in my own journey of, like, what I have been seeing for myself and what really excites me about living, I've got a lot of fears about what that looks like too, actually. So, and I think that's the same for all of us. So using this opportunity for what is the fear really showing you? Yeah.
And yes. Like, that's how are we doing for time?
We are on our time.
Again.
If you want to do a last riff, go over to you.
Well, again, be the change you seek. The only way I have learned over the time frame that I've studied these practices and also helped in business is you have to actually go inside. You have to actually be courageous enough to look at yourself in the mirror.
Yeah.
And start to recognize that. And then
you can't wipe the mirror clean.
Yeah, you can't wipe the mirror clean. Start to recognize that, hey, maybe I'm not presenting in a way that I think I'm presenting. And then the opportunities to hub up, because it's interdependence. We're moving. So coaches who are independent are now moving to trusted advisor, and then moving ultimately to interdependent guides. That's the path forward for anybody who's in the business of helping business realize their outrageous potential. So moving down that path, we have to actually start to realize as to who we are and why we are on the planet. But we also have to look to attract other people, as Sarah and I have now. It's been a year since we've known each other. There's all kinds of magic that I've learned about the world, myself, the potential as a function of interacting with Sarah. That's interdependence. And we've also gone through the forming, norming, and then storming exercise of saying and having stuff come up that I was really afraid of, and you were really afraid of. Maybe I was more afraid of than you. I can't remember exactly how that played out.
Well, and my old self would just run away and oh, you know. And it is so easy to do that, and it's like that commitment to staying connected and evolving together.
Yes,
With
yes.
understanding there is growth in
Because you
that.
can't perform until you've actually gone through that storming stage. You really can't, because the storming is the opportunity to higher vibrational frequency, to let go of the denser frequencies. So being the change you seek is so critical. And then part of that is to be able to remember, do what you can to not oops, and look in the mirror in terms of, this is the change you're actually being. Are you being the change? And you'll be able to recognize it from the people and the circumstances you're attracting to yourself. If you like them, keep going. If you don't like them, that's an opportunity to be able to go and let something go.
That's right. What's good about this?
What's
is
good about
just such
this?
a great question to ask in any time of challenge, and especially right now. I think that's really what we need, and hope for the future, and using our imagination for what really is good about this. So, do you want to do an outro for us?
yeah, let's do an
my
outro.
freaking
My hot guitar
burning
now.
in the sun. And thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next Thursday. And if you have a theme you'd like us to explore, please share that with us.
Down to the islands we go.
Down to the islands. If we can't travel, we can use our imagination and pretend we're somewhere. The neighbor's playing Brown Eyed Girl over there.
You want to do a fade?
A what?
Fade.
A fade? As I approach the camera, because we couldn't use our fancy stuff today. Flover and out. If I can.